no people in the future.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Yes, it is Monday, December 13th, 2021. I cannot believe that we are almost at the end of 2021. Incredible. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. At Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts right from our own backyards from across the country. And on Fridays, Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And check out, of course, the Wednesday show with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril is a progressive columnist from the Bucks County Courier-Times, the Intelligencer, and he joins me about every other week, although we've been having tough time with our schedule late, end of the semester, all that fun stuff. But he joins me to break down Bucks County, Pennsylvania international politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And patrons, yes, patrons, new feature here at Out the Coop. Patrons also get exclusive patron-only content on Patreon. You can support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Just head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can also help out the show right now by heading on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live, and share it with your friends. If you're sitting there, you're listening to this intro, hit that share button. Let everybody know that we are live right now. You can hop on our Discord server to continue the conversation during and after and all week long. And for more PA progressive talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, or Facebook, and subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to head on over to ricksmithshow.com and check out all his latest. I mean, Rick's show is taken off. Like I said, he's now on a WBAI in New York, KPFK in Los Angeles. He's on Chicago and Minneapolis, and everywhere in between. Free Speech TV Saturday show. Seriously, just head on over to ricksmithshow.com, check out all the latest. And if you haven't already, I don't know which rock you're living under, but you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. You make sure you follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. Attention gamers, look, holidays are here, folks. You got a gift to buy? Well, you got a gamer in the family? Well, head on over to the Game Inn. That's Game Inn with two N's. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based, black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, loads of collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops. And look, it's school time, so you know what that means. Yep, kids get discounts with every A on their report card. Check them out on their Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. That's at The Game Inn with two N's. Got a question about a game, look for something hard to find, shoot him an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And a special shout out, as always, goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayMan with two N's. That's at SongADayMan on Twitter. Well, welcome everybody to this week's Out to Coop Live. Tonight on Out to Coop Live, I welcome Diana Leygerman to the show. Diana is a teacher, writer, and former Central Bucks School Board candidate. We'll be talking about the ongoing political and cultural battles that have erupted in the Central Bucks School District and districts across Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and look, literally the nation. Last month's New York Times podcast on The Daily ran a two-part story on the increasing tensions in the Central Bucks School District. And following that podcast, Diana's article, Central Bucks is Not Okay, filled in some of the holes and context in the Times' story. Her personal and critical account of what happened in Central Bucks should be required reading for all of us. Diana Leygerman is a teacher, writer, and former Central Bucks School. I said this already. She lives in Warwick, PA, with her husband and her two children. She's the recipient of the Anne Frank Teaching Award and was honored at the SAFA, that's the Spirit of Anne Frank Awards, Gala in 2018. Her work has been published in The Week, Smercornish, the Independent, Women's Health, and several other online and print publications. And, I was looking at when she received that award at the Spirit of Anne Frank Awards, and she wrote about her experience there on Medium in 2018. And I think you get a good sense about why we kind of want her on the show here tonight. She concluded in this way, quote, "My grandmother grew up surrounded by war and death and dictatorship. My parents fled from anti-Semitism. At 11 years old, I came to the United States as a Jewish refugee. I live my life every day trying to create a better world for my children and as a teacher for the children of others. In our world today, when basic human rights are once again threatened, I refuse to fall short of teaching the lessons I know my students must learn if they are to grow up in a world my grandmother could only dream of. In our world today, in a world that is eerily Orwellian, I know I must be a voice of progress, change, and protest." Diana, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I have to say, people really, there's a link in the show notes. Head on over to her Medium writing. Not only is your writing, I think, important, which is one which we're going to talk about. Central Bucks is not okay, but it's beautiful. I mean, that story you told about the Anne Frank, the Spirit of Anne Frank Awards. Was so moving and gave such context with, why I think so many people are doing the kind of work that you're doing. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Thank you so much. I love writing. It's one of my passions.
Well, there you have it. Yeah, it seems like you, I seriously, I'm like looking at some of the stuff you did. I don't know how I have the energy. It's like whatever. But so part of the background here too, as well, we've been talking about what's been going on in Bucks County in the school board elections pretty frequently on this show. We've had folks on the show from the Palisades School District, from Penridge. We've been talking about what's happening in Central Bucks. Cyril Michaleko's been on the show quite a bit, and he's been followed up with what's it seems like a blow by blow every single day. Seemed to be like a new crisis around the way, and you were kind of in the middle of all this, and you were running for school board in Central Bucks. So before we kind of get to your article, New York Times stuff and all that, maybe you can kind of set the stage for us a little bit. Give us a little sense of kind of what brought you to that point where you're deciding that you were going to run for school board, and what was the context of what's happening in Central Bucks at that point?
Well, I have been toying with the idea of running for school board for quite some time. And I've always said to my husband, I said, well, I guess if it wasn't like a political thing, I would have done it a long time ago, because I never thought I could be an actual candidate for a local office. And so I kind of put that idea out of my head. But then when I kept on listening to the school board meetings and realized that this is much more now than just like your typical school board where they're just deciding, whatever's going on in the curriculum in the classroom. And I noticed these like hints of like personal beliefs and political agendas. I said, well, we can't have that in school. Like, I don't want politics affecting my children, especially not those politics. So I wasn't recruited by anyone. I wasn't, I just followed these Facebook groups, and they said, hey, we need someone for this region. And I said, oh, I live in this region. I guess this is the time. Having no idea what I was getting myself into. But since I've kind of always wanted to, there was an opening. I, did it. Impulse, basically.
Right. It seems like sometimes history chooses us, right? I mean, instead of the other way around.
Exactly.
Well, so you said, okay, see what was happening in the school board. So what's the timeline we're talking about? When did you start to notice to seeing the shift of what was happening in Central Bucks?
I think it was the summer of 2020. I started noticing the shift. And I actually had gotten off Facebook at that time after all of the George Floyd protests. I just didn't like what I was seeing from people that I knew. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to watch this. So I left Facebook, and then a couple of my friends said, you really have to come back and look at these groups of these parents. They're like taking over the school board. So it was summer 2020 when I really started listening to every school board meeting, every general school board meeting, none of the committee meetings, and started noticing this like trend of anti-science, like this whole rhetoric that was going on nationally, it was seeping into the school board. And then they started talking about, then like in January of 2020, I think, or 2021, sorry, they started talking about curriculum and, culturally responsive curriculum from what I remember. And that's my forte. Like I'm a teacher. I care very deeply about curriculum. So then I really started paying attention, and I started to get really concerned that they were trying to get rid of, certain books or any information about equity and diversity. So that's when I really started to get nervous.
And so were things contentious on the school board before then? Or did this seem to be a dramatic shift?
Well, I couldn't tell you because I'm being honest, I only started paying attention that summer, 2020. And I think that's true for many folks in terms of school boards. I mean, most people know that the school boards exist, but no one really knows what they do. And we ran into that problem when we were running.
Right.
And so I don't know if it was contentious before. From what I understand, speaking to school board members, former and current, it was never like this before.
That's the sense. The people that I've talked to at Central Bucks, and this was actually true in a lot of the school districts in Bucks County, where they said, beforehand, it was, the people that ran for school board, if you wanted information about who those candidates were, it was really hard to find out, right? Not very many people turned out for elections. And, sometimes there'd be issues that would come up in school that would cause some, consternation or whatever, in the deliberations, but it wasn't like what we've just seen. I mean, it wasn't this highly politicized, conspiracy-filled, venue that, like I think you said, mirrored these national politics. I should say, too, as well, Teresa Brown just chimed in and said, Diana is an awesome and caring person. So there you go.
Aw, Teresa,
I told
thanks
her I
for
would pass
listening.
that on. Yeah. And I know, and like I said, we were talking about before the show, is I live in the Penridge School District, and the previous round of election before this one in 2020, we had already gone through some pretty contentious stuff. Joan Cullen had, who's been the head or the vice head or the shadow head of the school board for a while now, said some pretty horrendous things about students after the protest, in support of, gun safety. And I remember the was it 20 some odd kids who were arrested at Penridge for sitting and walking out of school in support of, gun safety laws and stuff. She said, call them like communist and Marxist and all this kind of stuff. These are kids, right? Exercising that. So, it was clear to me that previous cycle that there was an issue that was coming on, but this is a whole different level, it seems to me. And what we saw in Central Bucks, I think, really kind of underscored it. And I think a lot of people had the sense of, hey, Central Bucks is like, it's a fairly well-off school district. It's the kind of place that teachers would love to go to. And students were, coming out of there doing great, right? Sports teams are doing great, and would not expect that Central Bucks would be a place that would become a focus of a kind of like a national news story in the New York Times, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Central Bucks, what's happening here obviously is happening nationwide, but I think it happens often in districts like Central Bucks, in primarily affluent, primarily white districts where people haven't been paying attention to what's going on in their schools and in the school boards, because typically parents just trust that,
Right.
you pick a good school district, then you take your kids there and everything is well. So we trust the school district and the school board directors because we elect them. And we never, I think, never really thought about the fact that politics can seep into the every level of the nook and cranny of our local government, including school boards. And I think this was a perfect opportunity for that astroturfing that happened, that all of these suburban, mainly white school districts are now dealing with the situation.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Calling it astroturfing, right? Because I think that there was a lot of narratives that this stuff is like, just spontaneously showing up at school boards. And, it didn't take too much digging, especially here, to see that it was anything but that. So that kind of brings us to like this recent New York Times podcast that you know, gave us a version of the story of what was happening in Central Bucks and elsewhere as kind of like this spontaneous thing, right? So for folks who don't know, the New York Times has this podcast called The Daily. It is one of the world's most popular podcasts. I mean, it's like hugely listened to. And, you know, to their credit, I would say, they paid attention to, you know, the fact. And again, it's because there's connections between Bucks County and what happens in New York and this, you know, and this journalist crew. But so they paid attention to it, right, and spent some time and actually sent somebody out here to talk to people, which is more so than we saw from a lot of the other national media. But it was this two-part series. The first part was saying what happened, and it seemed to be a story about this organic rise of just some parents who were concerned about stuff, and then it got more contentious. And then a part two, which was like, hey, let's go meet this angry dad who seemed to kind of wanted to get involved in politics. And I came away from listening to that absolutely enraged that they were going to do a both-siderism on this, that they were going to completely ignore the context of what had happened in the previous year and pretend that this is some sort of, you know, magical, like spontaneous uprising, right? So let's start from there, right? I mean, in the aftermath, this is what prompted you to write that piece, right? You know, the Central
Right.
Bucks is not okay. So take us into like listening to that podcast and like your decision to write this piece in kind of in response, but it felt like more than a response. It felt like a telling of what actually went down.
So I listen to the Daily every day on my way to work. I actually had no idea this podcast was coming out.
Which is
I mean, I
remarkable.
heard that people were talking to the New York Times, but I, for some reason, thought it was just going to be like an article. And so the one of the mornings, you know, on my way to work, someone texted me and said, "Hey, you know, when you're going to listen, you're going to be surprised." And so I listened to the first one, and it wasn't, you know, it didn't bother me as much as the second one, really. And then when I listened to the second one, I thought the first one was good well, when I listened to the second one as I was driving to work, I was yelling at my radio. Like every single thing that Paul Martino said, I would just yell back because there was so much arrogance and so much gaslighting in that podcast. And I know that Campbell, he did a really good job. He really tried to get Martino to say like what his mission was and everything, but like we were living it here.
Right.
And I was very personally affected by Martino's, you know, money in the campaign and his smears against me. So as I was listening to it, from my point of view, I was really angry because I don't think that it was a fair interpretation or a fair story about what happened here in Central Bucks. And what happened here in Central Bucks is not just an angry dad randomly, coincidentally, just said, "Oh, you know, I want to help. Here's $500,000 to help you." Like, no, it was on purpose. It was strategic. You know, I saw him recruiting people last August in 2020, I mean. So it wasn't just like he randomly got upset and decided to throw some money at this because he had it. He had a political consultant. You can see from all the campaign reports, campaign finance reports, that where the money went, and it went to actual political strategists and, you know, consultants. And so I just thought it was so funny that he paints himself to be this dad who's angry. Meanwhile, our campaign really was just a handful of moms and dads
Right.
who were fundraising and, you know, actually starting a grassroots campaign. And that's what made me angry, I think. And that's why I ended up writing that article, because I just wanted people, even if 10 people read it, I just wanted them to know that this isn't the whole story.
No,
This is the
absolutely.
part 3.
Absolutely. And so let's be clear. So for anybody who does not know, like Paul Martino here that we're talking about, I mean, Paul Martino is basically a venture capitalist, right? He's you know, got millions of dollars, right? And he basically decided that he was going to personally get involved in these campaigns around the kind of reopen PA, which kind of the reopen PA, of course, is, you know, it's code for everything at this point, right? It was code for, you know, the anti-masking wars, became critical race theory and all this. And he, like exactly as you said, was just dumping funds into school boards. I mean, my school district, they dropped $10,000. He dropped $10,000 at a drop of a hat, which basically matched all the fundraising of all the other candidates that were involved. And so, but in your school district, it seemed that because he was personally involved and was on the ground there, that it got particularly nasty. And you could see this, and this is a guy who went on the podcast and basically said, hey, I just started this because I wanted to help make sure that we kept our kids in school. And then lo and behold, suddenly there were parents that were concerned about this too as well. And so I thought I'd help them out. And now, I love what he says at the end of it. He says, now I've got this asset to figure out what I'm going to do with it. Right. Which is what he was doing all along. So can you talk to us a little bit about like what it was, like how that money began to seep into the campaign when you saw these kind of attacks coming your way?
Well, at first, we didn't really know much about who Paul Martino was until, I would probably say,
This podcast is supported by Electrify America. If you're a daily listener, you love great podcasts. But remember when you didn't?
He got someone to go through, years of my tweets and makes a website about me. And, I'm a writer, so a lot of everything was very open and public, and I used to get paid for it. So, I had a brand. So he makes this website, and I didn't know who made it. And then it says paid for by Bucks Families for Leadership. And when we started digging, we realized that, that is his PAC. And so then we start researching and figuring out who Paul Martino really is. And we realize he is, dumping money into all of our opponents' campaigns. And it's funny because for my opponent, he actually didn't dump money directly into his PAC, but because he paid for all of the smears against me, I guess that was his contribution to my opponent's campaign. So that's how we found out really about who he was, what he's like, what he was doing. And of course, once you know who he is, that leads you down a rabbit hole of, oh, okay, he's not just like some random dad in the district. But yeah, he went after me pretty hard. And I always thought that was really interesting because I didn't understand exactly why he chose me. But, I just had assumed that A, I was an easy target because all my tweets were very public. And B, my opponent had no platform whatsoever. So it was easier to just take me down a notch rather than build up his, his candidate, which is what I told him straight up. I said, you could have just used all that money to help your candidate, but instead you chose to smear a public school teacher. So I guess that's what angry dads do, Kevin.
Well, angry white dads, especially, right? With lots and lots of money and too much time on their hands, apparently.
Yeah, it's sad to me, honestly. Like, it seems small and it seems sad to me that somebody would do something like that.
But in some ways, like, thank God you were who you were while he was putting this attack, because I can imagine, even so, that must have been disorienting. Like, all of a sudden, like, where the hell did this come from? Why is this random website coming up with all my stuff on it, right? And they're attacking me. I have no idea where this is coming from. That just got to be like disorienting and like, what is going on? I'm in a school board race.
I know, it was really gross. And you know what? It came out. I just had come back with my kids from celebrating their birthdays, and then we went to Hershey Park, and I came home and it was all everywhere. And I was really upset, obviously, because it wasn't that my tweets weren't true. Everything that was there, they were mine. But the way they were placed together in the context that it was, right? Like, the idea was to create a story, a narrative about who I am, right?
Right.
And luckily, I have a lot of background in rhetoric and propaganda and all that, so I knew exactly what happened here. But the general public doesn't understand how propaganda works. So, they're really, really upset and calling me all sorts of names. The things that I read about myself from the community members, like, I had never uttered such words to anyone, to their face or behind their backs. Even like the president or the vice president of my kids' PTO was saying really awful things about me.
God.
I know, it was awful. But you know what? It took me like a couple of days, and then I just realized, like, they're threatened. Like, why else would someone do something like that? They went after my job, Kevin. Like, they called the charter offices. They called my bosses, like human resources. I had to have a conversation. Like, it was disgusting of what they do to people. And I said, I literally I want to help our children. Like, I have no agenda of any kind. I have been a teacher forever. all I want to do is help. Now, they have an agenda if they go after someone like that, right?
Exactly.
Like that's the thing. Like, do we have different politics? Of course. But like, that doesn't matter in a school board, or shouldn't in any case, right?
Well, and this seems to be the difficulty of folks I mean, with the exception of one person, everyone I spoke to and everyone who was running that we had on the show or whatever was all women who were running. They were all running kind of with a similar kind of mentality, right? It's like, I've been doing this, I've been involved in education, or I've been involved in the community, or I've been involved in this school for all this time, and I feel that I can make a contribution to making the schools better. Right. And that's where it started. Right. And to say, okay, I feel like I understand it. I've been around long enough. I have got some ideas. I've done some work on this, and I think I can do a good job here. And so you're entering this race thinking you can do this. And then on the other hand, you've got a war machine, really, that is about a full-on assault on gaining power in the school board. Right. And that's it. Right.
That's it.
And like you said, there was like your opponent. It was pretty wild. I remember when I first came across your campaign, I started say, well, who's she running against? Like, what the hell is going on here? And you could barely find anything.
Right.
And anything that was there was like vanilla kind of, you could have picked it from anybody's campaign. It was just some random stuff. And so it's like, okay, this is just a wholesale assault on you in order to make sure that they gain power on the school board.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. Which is also interesting because in my region specifically, it's a Democrat has never won. So I already had an uphill battle here. Right. So, I had like a 800 plus voter deficit, right? So 840, I think, or something like that, more Republicans are registered to vote here than Democrats. So I already had a pretty, strong uphill battle and then, you add the smear to it, and that makes it even more difficult. So, not that I think the smear really helped much, because I still came in within like 200 and some votes, which is pretty amazing for an 800 deficit. Which goes to show that if we work just, a little smarter and harder next time, you never know what can happen.
Well, exactly. And I think that's really what's at stake when, his money coming into the campaign. I mean, was basically saying we see, more and more of in our areas trending more and more blue, right? Especially since so much of the Republican Party has gone off the rails. Right. I mean, Bucks County used to be known as kind of like, okay, yeah, it was fairly kind of, you have lots of Republican controlled offices, but it was a fairly moderate kind of, county, so that you can actually, I had one of my daughters, my daughter played soccer for a while, and she played on a travel team and stuff. And one of the other girls on the team, her dad worked in kind of Republican politics in Bucks County. And like he and I would, we disagree on politics, right? But you can have a reasonable conversation about stuff, right? And kind of have an interesting exchange and share. And that was, in my mind, what the reputation in, let's say, the Bucks County Republican Party has been. But of late, that has not happened. I mean, that's, you're still a shell of that old party there. But these right-wing operatives have really taken over. And as we've seen, just the sheer numbers of people that Bucks County sent to the insurrection on January 6th, right? The bus loads that were sent out that way, when we had the county with the largest participation, right? Kind of in the state, and the state with some of the largest participation. It seems like the game has changed. Yeah. And I'm really curious of, now that we're kind of a few weeks out after this election, when you're thinking about going forward, not say you necessarily, right, but maybe you, but kind of moving forward as we're kind of thinking about, say, the next round of school boards, we got midterm elections that are coming up and stuff. What did you see happening kind of on the ground? You think that, yeah, we need to do more of this, or, definitely we're going to have to change our game, and you have a sense about where things need to go from here, given your experience?
Yeah, we learned a lot from this campaign. First is that, when we were, first told not to talk about masking, and then we're told not to talk about CRT. But the problem with that is that they were talking about that, and we were just being quiet. So they were building the narrative this whole time, And while I was screaming like, we really need to be talking about these things, people were telling me, who have way more experience in politics, so I can't, who am I? People were telling me that like, no, don't discuss this. And so we basically allowed them to build this narrative. And towards the very end of the campaign, they pinned CRT on us out of nowhere. And we're like, we never even said it, right? We never even used the term. And that's it. Like,
but
they pinned it on us.
But you thought it, didn't you?
I didn't even know CRT existed until I started running this campaign.
I can't tell you how many people said
that's how funny this whole thing is, right? Like, they did, and listen, I got to give them credit for it. They did such a good job instilling this. CRT encompasses everything now. Yep. Anything you could think of is now CRT, right? So they really did. They did a great job with that, and a great job, I mean, by making people think that their white children are going to feel bad about themselves. That was and I said to a friend who said that to me, I was like, I mean, you do realize that most of the teachers who teach here, especially, are white, who have white children. Like, why would they ever want any child to feel bad? And we're teachers. Our goal is to make sure that no one feels bad about anything. Right. But, you say your kid's going to feel bad, and that tugs at the heartstrings, that like pathos, the rhetoric, and that's it. Parents will buy into that real quick. So anyway, so I think what we learned is that we can't let them set this false narrative, which they did, and that's just the number one. Do not allow them to build a narrative. And what frustrated me the most is that the people that were running saw this happening, but the people above us who were supposed to be helping us refused to pay attention. And the national news refused to pay attention until the very end. And so while they were building it all up, the local level, national level Dems were not paying attention. I remember screaming into the void of Twitter, like, hello, is anyone going to help us? And so, people got to pay attention to what's going on. You can't just be so hyper focused on this one thing. So look, in terms of the future, I'm not planning on running again, even though people have told me you're just saying that now, but I'm not, but I learned a lot, and I would like to help others run. And, we still have a really solid team that I'm not going to say too much about because I don't know who's listening, but we have a really solid team. And we have really great ideas. And because of what we learned, we will be successful next time around. And I think we were really successful this time around. We got 2 people elected on our team, on our slate, 2 Democrats. We got a woman of color elected. Yep. So that was incredible. In Chalfont, too, which is, also a very more right-leaning. I came pretty close. All of us came really close. So it's not over, and it's actually just begun. And it's unfortunate that it was so contentious and it was so ugly. It was really unfortunate. School board should not have been like this. Our children were paying attention. Right. Our teachers. I had teachers coming up to me and begging me to win. I was like, okay, please win. I'm like, okay,
okay, well, I'll win.
The teachers, we had their support. Teachers, support staff, administrators. They wanted us because they knew what the other side represented. So it's tough. It was tough.
Well, I can't tell you how good it is to hear you put it so plainly about some of the issues that you were facing in the campaign, because I think that we've been railing on this for a while on our show, and we had even before then, about this problem of the candidates, especially candidates that are at school boards and local elections, who are coming from the grassroots, who are kind of coming from the community, do not have, just like you said, do not have a lot of experience kind of running political campaigns and this stuff, but have a good sense about what's happening in their communities, and then being told by, whether it's county Dems or whether it's state or whatever it might be, no, we need to go in this other kind of direction. And, and I think this is my reading. I'm not going to ask you to go here with me, but the thing is, I think that for a long time that Democrats in Bucks County got used to losing, right? And this just being a Republican district, there's not much that you can do about it, that they kind of relied upon, say, polling data or consultants who said this is what wins campaigns, as opposed to actually building organizations from the ground up. And, you know, I had a few weeks back, I had Laura Putnam on the show, and, you know, she's a professor of history out in University of Pittsburgh, and she like studies kind of local elections in Pennsylvania and kind of all this. And she put out this piece that I'm going to space the title right now. She read this article was basically, it's going to take more than postcards or something like this. And she was, you know, making this case about the need to build strong organizations that are rooted in the relationships that we have and in the communities that we have from that ground up, as opposed to the other way. And I kept on saying this to folks or not kept on saying this, but I was sharing this with folks in my school districts in Penridge, just saying, well, look, everything that you all did was right on the money, right? Except it's just the first time around, right? And so when I look at what you just said there and say, you know, that knowledge of saying, hey, those folks who are telling us that, hey, this is how you win a campaign, they don't necessarily know what the hell they're talking about. And the fact that what I'm hoping for is that the people that, you know, just like you said, the organizations that were built and the kind of slates that were built, is that that we're going to start to see a connection between the folks that were working in Central Bucks together and Penridge and Palisades, that we can start doing some of this stuff countywide eventually too, because you know, it seems that a lot of this, say, progressive organizations or even the Democratic money has kind of given up on building organizations, and I think it's going to take us to do it. So to hear you say that so directly from your experience is kind of like, is such a breath of fresh air, because I think a lot
validating, Kevin.
It's validating. It's validating, and it's kind of like, yes, because I think some people who run are afraid to say that because, you know, they don't want to like upset the apple cart or something, make people feel uncomfortable. But if the goal is to win and the goal is to kind of stave off, which is, you know, this is beyond kind of partisan politics, and we're talking about people who want to ban books, who are kind of lying about basic science, who are kind of telling tales about propaganda about what's happening in our schools, and using, like you said, critical race theory to basically say, no, we're not going to talk about any truth that doesn't say America rocks, nothing was ever wrong, and white people rule. I mean, this is just, that doesn't prepare our kids. That's not the future that we're in. Right. And that's the worst thing I could possibly have. So I'm looking, and I keep on hearing this now, which is so encouraging to me. And it's ironic because in so many ways, I'm the dark cloud in every room. And I'm like, here's all the problems. But this is the kind of thing that I find so encouraging, is that the organizing on the ground was outstanding. And I really think that, you know, if we keep on, that's where our focus goes, that's where our dollars go, that's where our time goes in building these organizations. I think we've got a real opportunity to really, you know, change the direction of this county.
Yes, I agree with you. And I agree with pretty much everything you said. You know, it took us a while to get the help that we received. And I'm talking about like the local, building the grassroots. You know, we had pretty much no one really helping us. Besides a few key people in the primaries. And then when it came time to the general, there was a lot of health and safety conversations in the school board. And I think more people started paying attention, and then they learned about us. And so then we had an incredible team, just like out of nowhere. You know, they just came, they brought their friends, and one after the other. We had canvassers, we had people who were fundraising, we had social media people out of nowhere. And these were people with just our neighbors. Like, they weren't, you know, political strategists anywhere. You know, we found a lot of the moms and dads, you know, one of them was like, oh, well, I work, you know, as a social media strategist, I can help you with your social media. So like everyone used what they had, their expertise, for our campaign. And I have to say, and I'm just, you know, patting ourselves on the back here, but like Central Bucks did an incredible job organizing.
Totally.
You know, every time, all the people that I worked with, everybody who helped, everybody who volunteered, we were on point. We knew what we were doing. And unfortunately, we were doing it a little too late. I think that's what it was. You know, once the national conversation caught up, it was too late.
It was too late. Yep.
Yeah, it was too late. And, you know, I'm not going to say anything about people who've been doing this forever, but I think fresh minds and fresh voices who come to politics not jaded by politics yet, right? Not doing like the same thing we've been doing for years and years should be listened to, right? And you know, I've been paying attention to politics since I was in high school. And just because I never ran doesn't mean I haven't read and really paid attention to the landscape of it all. And I could tell what was going on. Just like before Trump was elected, I knew what was going to happen if he were.
Yep.
And you know, when I hear journalists and talking about how, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Nobody could have predicted this. I'm like, we predicted this.
Right.
We knew, right? I mean, like, we knew what was going to happen.
Exactly.
Like, we knew because we didn't have blinders on, because it was very obvious, because we read history books, we pay attention,
Exactly.
right? And so when you're here and you're seeing this like conversation, like whispering of CRT and this and that, and like, you know, on Twitter, you see like, it's just popping up. Mom, you know, fights with school board. Dad fights with school board. And you see all these like, you know, sensational YouTube videos. You know that's not on accident. You know that's on purpose. Anyone who just like, oh, it's only happening here, it's only happening there. No, it's happening everywhere. And not enough people paid attention to that. Not enough people in power on the Democrat side paid attention to that. And so we ended up losing a lot, you know. And the goal isn't to only win, like you said, against these like moderate Republicans. You know, moderate Republicans have been around forever. This is a brand new, I don't even know what you want to call it, extreme far right. They don't even like most of the moderate Republicans. They go against their, you know, quote, their own party. So this isn't like your basic Republican. When I say Republicans in my article, I don't mean the normal like moderate Republicans that we all used to know. I mean these like far right Trumpists, right? That are infiltrating all the local government because they knew what they had to do in order to win back what they lost in 2020.
Right, and I think their ability to keep on winning is going to decrease, like with every election, which is going to make it more extreme in terms of what the reaction is going to be. And that's the way I look at it. And I two things is that, you know, you said about like, we knew. I remember one of the things that I kicked myself in the ass most about is that I was 100. I believed that Trump was going to win the election against Hillary up until the day before. And I kicked myself for allowing myself to believe what they said, you know, like the media was saying and all this stuff. And I allowed myself to have that, what I should have just trusted my gut. Right. Yeah. And I think that exactly what you're saying there. And I think that this is the power of organizing too, as well, right? Is that once we have an organization that you start to build, is that when we're telling these things, you know, somebody comes in and says, hey, you should be doing this instead. And your gut says, I don't think so. And now you've got all these other folks in the room that are looking at like, yeah, no, we're not buying it. We believe that we're going to stick to our guns. Either you're on board with us or, you know, hit the high road. And I think that, you know, the ability to start as you know, organizers and in kind of these small nascent groups that are kind of really getting together to be able to make demands back instead of having to, rely is just amazing. So that for me is incredible. And I start from the place where I believe that that's really the only place where power comes from. And I don't mean power like power over people, but I mean, if we believe in a democracy, right, where the majority of people should actually be making decisions, right, not the money. Right. Well, then we have to be in a situation where, you know, we're organized and we're exercising those muscles and trusting ourselves instead of like a consultant class or people who've just been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and listen, you brought up a good point about how, you know, it was never like this before. So a lot of people who were giving us advice, well, this is what we did in 2017. This is what we did in 2018. And we're like, but this is different. This is completely different.
It's like, thank you for your CV, but
right, you can't use any past strategy. You know, this is something completely different. You know, people told me you can't, after the smear came out, they're like, you can't say this, you can't say that, you have to be completely quiet. And I'm like, no, I will not be quiet. You know, this isn't the landscape. I'm not a quiet Democrat. Like, sorry, I'm going to be myself. And if I win, I win. I lose, I lose. But you can't play a role, right? Like you can't. Totally. You yourself in politics. I mean, here, at least on the local level. And that gets people behind you.
Right. Exactly. And I think that right there, it should be the baseline understanding of politics, is that if you're not going to be authentic in terms of what you're representing, that is going to come across, number one, to the voters. This is why all this poll tested nonsense is, I mean, look, I'm all for do your polling and things like this to get a lay of the land, but trying to kind of respond to some sort of canned messaging about stuff, people see through that in a snap. And what you said earlier too, as well, you know, I was listening to the Mehdi Hassan show this past weekend. You had the woman, it's just horrible, and I'm spacing her name right now, who's basically behind the 1619 project. And
Hannah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't know. I was literally just talking about her like a few hours ago.
Hannah Jones.
Yes. Is it Jones?
No.
Is it? Let me. Well, anyway, I will put it. I will correct it if it's not. I'll put it in the notes. But so she was basically said almost exactly what you said before. Is like by seeding the ground for them to talk about CRT and talk about this anti-masking, as full of nonsense as it was. Right. That was a huge mistake. Yeah. Nicole Hannah Jones. There you go. Yep. Amy. Thank you, Amy. So Nicole Hannah Jones, she was saying exactly this. And I think that we saw that happen in district after district. We say, well, okay, if we, you know, they're talking nonsense about race and they're doing all this kind of racist stuff. So if we just ignore them, we're going to go away. You know, this has been one of the themes of Raging Chicken that since we started, when we started following the kind of the rise of white nationalists that were happening in kind of the center parts of the state that were happening in Kutztown and Berks County, where I teach. We're following this, and everybody was saying us the same exact thing at that point. So just ignore these folks. Don't give them a platform. Like, no. You have to pay attention to this. There is nothing in the historical record that says ignoring them will work. If you ignore them and you allow them to organize, they get more powerful.
Absolutely. That's exactly what happened. Ignoring doesn't work. Not here.
Doesn't work. No, you know, I've got this, here, I'll pull it down from my thing. I've got this, I don't know if you ever saw this little, I'll show it up for folks. It's this Karl Popper meme, right? And it basically, it says that it's the paradox of tolerance. And it basically says, well, you know, there's a certain point where there's certain people you can't tolerate, right? You can't tolerate Nazis. You can't tolerate racists. You can't tolerate people that wish to kind of remove the rights of women. Right? You cannot. Right. These are people who are outside of the civic, you know, kind of like agreement. And that's the irony. And that's the paradox. In order to kind of like preserve, say, a multicultural, tolerant kind of democratic culture, you have to exclude those folks who would use their own power to kind of wipe everyone else's away. Right. So
if you ignore them, they just become stronger. They prefer that you ignore them. So you're not paying attention to what they're building. And by the time you start paying attention, it may be too late, which 100%. As we saw many times through the last couple or several years, that if we ignore it, it will be too late.
100%. Well, we're coming up on time now. I've already kept you over when I was there, but I mean, thank you so much for all that, you know, God, all that you did, all that you do, all that you said here tonight. And I will put links to your piece. Central Bucks is not okay in the show notes. And I encourage everyone that, you know, to read that and to continue the organizing, to continue the work on the ground, and to know that, you know, as much as there's a discourse that kind of came out after the elections that wanted to say, well, you know, that we're defeated and all this stuff, it's not true. Is that we have such incredible assets, right? Kind of at our fingertips and in our communities and with the relationships that we build. So I can't wait to see where things go next. And you know, look, if I start seeing your name, not necessarily on ballots, I understand, but kind of associated with any kind of organizing efforts, I might just be giving you a call again back on.
Yeah,
I'd love to have you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, you'll probably be seeing a lot of me. So.
Excellent. That's what I was hoping to hear. Fantastic. Well, listen, anything else that you want to kind of close out with, you want to leave folks with before we take off and say goodnight?
Sure. I think a lot of Democrats after Biden won kind of said, oh, our job here is done. And they went back to being quote unquote sleeping Dems. But that is the most absolutely the wrong thing you can do. Like we have to wake up because our country right now is under fire. And just because Joe Biden won means really nothing, because all that did is just embolden the other side. And we have to wake up and we have to keep fighting, because literally our children's lives are at stake. And that's all. we have to do that. So I appreciate you having me on, Kevin.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you on. And there's your marching orders, everybody, right there. Right.
Fight for your kids,
You got
really.
it.
That's all.
100%. 100%. Well, thank you, Diana, so much for being on the show tonight. Thank you all for tuning in and watching it. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back on the other side of the break with some closing thoughts. Any additional comments or questions or calls that you want to have in tonight, you can feel free. You can join by kind of hitting on that riverside.fm link that's in the show notes on our YouTube channel. Remember that if you do join for that, you want to call in, you got something to say, make sure you turn down the volume on your YouTube, and otherwise you're going to get the feedback. Just like a radio show, you would call in, you're going to get echoing and all that nonsense. You don't want that. I don't want that. So if you're calling through Riverside, make sure you kind of shut off the volume and mute your YouTube. And also closing comments. And look, this has been, I hope for everybody, an incredibly encouraging night. And thank you again, Diana, for being on the show. And I wish you all the best, and look forward to talking for the next round of organizing.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We'll be back right after this quick break with some more. Well, I do this every single week. I do this with this. I mess up the music, don't I? Yes, I do. Well, we'll be right back after this quick break. I'll remind you that you can help support this show by going to patreon.com/rcpress today. We'll see you back in a minute.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? Where are all my people?
Hey everybody, welcome back for the little after show. Oh God, I had a list of all the names that people were suggesting last week for what we should call this segment, the afterlife, afterlife, maybe we'll call it. I don't know what we're going to call it, but I don't know about you, but that was one of the most encouraging conversations I have had in a long time. I've been following her. I followed her campaign. I followed and been reading her stuff now for a bit, and it's just, she's just a kind of outstanding human being, right? She's an amazing candidate, great kind of organizer, great candidate, and like her analysis there, I think it's just spot on, right? I mean, that building that power from the ground up is kind of where we need to be. And building an organization from the grassroots, so that we can kind of check each other and check in with each other about what we know is going on, and not to rely upon, people who've been doing this for a long time, to dictate the terms of our candidacy. I think Diana is absolutely right. We are in a, not that I need to tell you that, but we are in a historically different period than we were in even 5 years ago, even 10 years ago. The only thing I'll add to as well is that, this is something that has been kind of growing for a while. And this is, you've heard me the past few weeks just kind of railing on this kind of celebrity, I don't know what to call it. I mean, this celebrity worship discourse or ideology or practice, or I think on habitus, right? This guy Pierre Bourdieu talks about habitus as these kind of collections of practices and rituals, and that seems to be has so infected our culture, and it infects our politics. What Diana had said there too as well is, people had thought, it's okay, we elected Biden, good, all right, we did our job, we can go home now. Nope. Biden's not going to do it, right? I remember some of the early days of Raging Chicken. One of the things that, I even said is, there's the man on the white horse is not coming, right? To use that discourse. At another point in around some union organizing and some other kind of efforts, we hoped that the leaders were going to take care of something. I did an article, and the graphic for it was like an upside down comic unicorn with its X thighs out and say the unicorn is dead, right? The idea is that, the one kind of savior is not going to come down, is going to help us out. We have the power in our hands, and this is really my hope moving forward, is that we build on those, on that organizing, and we find, even more people. Because look, as awesome as Diana is, there's even more people out there who have, maybe not the exact same degree of awesomeness as a candidate, right, as a thinker, as a teacher, but having different sets of skills that are equally as awesome in building an organization, right? So building our capacity, right, not putting all our eggs in one basket, but building all of our capacity is where we need to be, I think, right? Because, what I saw here in Penridge, like in the Penridge School District, was, yes, there were awesome candidates. There were awesome school board candidates. And they did exactly what Diana was saying, is they were on point. They had, they were doing everything that you need to do as to organize around kind of winning elections, right? And just phenomenal. But, again, it's an uphill battle. I think even more so in the Penridge School District than it is in Central Bucks, just given the kind of, the political constituency and the dominance of kind of Republicans in the area. But, I think there's definitely overlaps there. But anyways, my point being is that you have these awesome folks, and then what made, the candidates get their power, right? Candidates can get their power from two places, right? One, they can get their power from money, or they get their power from people. And what was happening in so many of these school board elections is the power was coming from people. The money was on the other side, right? The money was on the kind of the right-wing conspiracy theory propaganda side, right? And that's something we got to, critically think and kind of engage with and strategize about how we actually kind of get past that. And my belief is to increase the power on our side, where our constituents are, where our power base is, and that's with each other, right? In numbers and organizing and door knocking, everything you need to be. Yes, it is hard to compete when you've got someone who's dropping tens of thousands of dollars into local school board elections, right? And what you have is a group of friends, right? And a lot of will, and you do the door knocking, you do that work. That's still hard to combat that money, right? But we have it in our grasp right now, I think, really to turn the tables here in Bucks County, right? The PA1, it can be a different place, and I think we just have to continue to remind ourselves that where the power is with us and with these organizers who emerged out of these school board races, right? I was saying to Diana too as well, is this is before the show and kind of at a quick break there, is that, I look forward to, having more organizers on the show. I mean, I cannot wait to see who emerges out of, these different organizations. What organizations emerge out of what we saw in the school board elections. In some cases, it will be kind of rejuvenated local Democratic kind of clubs or Democratic Party, groupings. In other cases, it's going to be, kind of adjacent organizations, right? That may not be just Democratic Party, right? But they might be what we see in so many other kind of areas where we see coalitions of, civil rights organizations and women's groups and kind of the DSA and, Indivisible, these kind of like, constituency power organizations that are making demands upon the kind of candidates that we need to see. I had some, before the show, I was checking out our Discord, and I wish I still had it up. I would read it to you now. But there was a conversation that was going back and forth on the Discord about the candidates that are running in the PA1 and what people thought about them. And this is I'm sorry, I should be more clear about this, that we're running for Congress, right, against Fitzpatrick. And, there's a lot of frustration, let's put it like that, right, is that there's a lot of frustration that there's this gap, right? The gap is between the kind of candidate that we need and want and the kind of candidate that we're getting, right? And I want to be very, very clear that is not meant at all as a knock against any of the candidates yet. I don't think we've really seen like that campaign really get going before we can make any of those kinds of judgments, right? I will accept at this point that the candidates that are that have declared so far to run against Fitzpatrick on the Democratic side of the ticket are doing so for the right reasons, and they want to win, and they're building organizations. I know Ashley Ahas, I think I got her last name right. I know that she spent a good amount of time this summer kind of doing door knocking and door knocking for other candidates who are running for school board and things like this, who are running for county seats and things like this. And that's all really good stuff, right? And there's that kind of acknowledgement, right? At the same time, we also know that, that this is a similar pattern that we saw in the candidates that have declared so far, is that, they're not people that cut their teeth on organizing in our communities, right? They're people that have really good credentials and they may turn out to be outstanding candidates. We shall see, right? But there's that disconnect between the organization, the constituency base, right, and the kind of candidates that the Democratic Party in Bucks County are choosing. And I know, I've been told this multiple times about, well, look, if you're going to have any kind of decent candidate, a candidate's got to be able to raise so on in millions of dollars in order to win in Bucks County. To some degree, there's some truth about the need to raise money for that. But I also think that is a talking point from consultants, Democratic Party consultants, who see things through the lens of money. Right? Look, there is no doubt that Fitzpatrick is a formidable candidate, right? He's a good politician. I disagree with him, but as a politician, right, he is good at what he does, and he's got lots of money, right? So when people see money, a lot of what happens in Democratic Party politics, right, especially when you start getting with the consultant class and the pollsters and all this stuff, what they start doing is they start just wanting to do dollar for dollar. And they start looking for candidates who they think, based upon their experience and their profession, right, can raise the money to meet the same money as Fitzpatrick, right? That's a problem, right? It's a problem because the money is not with us. The money is elsewhere. And that will only reinforce that dynamic. That will only reinforce that disconnect and that gap between the work that we're doing on the ground and the candidates that kind of get to represent us. Now, we might win an election, right? Okay, that's great. But that doesn't mean that we get the kind of candidates that we need. So this is the story. What you heard Diana Leygerman talk about tonight is like this. I think the story of Bucks County too as well. I mean, you saw the lengths to which, and again, you got to read her piece, because the lengths to which Paul Martino and his kind of cronies, the lengths that they went to attack her, right, and try to smear her, they didn't give a shit about the impact upon her, upon her family, upon the school board. They just wanted to win, right? That's the case in point of what they will do. What the Republican Party in this county, in this state, will do. That's who they are. They've shown us who they are. Let's believe them. They said, hi, this is me. Look at what I just did. We should say, we acknowledge that that's who you are. Therefore, we're gonna meet it, right? That's how we're gonna organize. We're not gonna organize to that. Just say, we're gonna look for the moderate, blah blah blah. No. We need to talk about this tonight too. So, but you look at increasingly what's happening in the Republican Party with the former kind of moderates in the Republican Party. You've got, depending on what we're talking about, is like, there's majorities in the Republican Party, both within this county, within this state, and across the country, right? Who buy into the big lie about the election, who buy into the kind of like, COVID is being overblown for political purposes, right? Masks are an attempt to control us it's crazy. So as much as like there are some Republicans who want to hold on that mantle of, yes, there are moderates out there, you're a dwindling breed, folks. You no longer control the reins of your own party. You've been hollowed out. The irony of that, of course, is that, these are the people that, during the Red Scare, they're always going to say, yeah, the socialists are going to come and burrow into our institution. They're going to take us over from within. That's what's happening in their party. Right? You have these off-the-wall, like right-wing extremists in their party with lots of money who have been building the organizing on the ground and are just as willing to cut all of those folks down than they are anything else. That's why we see, what people keep on calling a crisis of the Republican Party. So no, it's just a transformation. And most of the Republicans in elected office have gone along with it. And now they're doubling down with it. So we have to be prepared for that. Right? As much as when we're talking about a school board election, we'd like to be able to say, hey, this shouldn't be partisan stuff. We should be thinking about candidates who are going to be highly qualified. They're going to be able to do the best for our kids in our schools. That's what we should be doing. But that's not where we are. We can't let our desires for what we wish would be cloud our vision for what is now. And we are in the is. Right? We need to be in the moment, in its messiness, in its discomfort. And as, Diana said, is like we are in a point of real crisis in this country if we don't stop this and push this back. The good news, of course, is you heard it here. The organizing was amazing. And I have, uncharacteristically, these school boards, the organization that went around these school board elections in Bucks County has made me optimistic about directions that we're going. I say that knowing full well the hill is steep. Right? That this is not a throw it in neutral. This is the hike up the mountain here. But I think we could do it together. So anyways, thank you all for tuning in tonight. I didn't mention this at the top of the show. I just kind of forgot to mention this at the top of the show. I wish I had mentioned it at the top of the show. So next week, it's probably going to get released a little bit earlier, but next week we're going to have Christopher Rodkey on the show. Chris is he's a UCC pastor in Dallastown, PA, out in kind of the York area. And he's recently declared his candidacy. He's going to be running state representative out there, and he is someone that I've connected with for a while now. Right, I've been following his work. He's in many ways. Look, I've said this on the show before. I grew up Catholic, right, and I grew up Catholic as someone who was moved by the stories of people standing up for the least among us, right? And then sure, that had everything to do with the fact that, my younger years, like my parents split up when I was 5, right? In part because, not just only, but I mean, it's everybody's got their complicated story. But also my sister was, she became kind of mentally impaired, mentally handicapped as a result of the MMR shot and then some medical malpractice and so on, which was was a huge strain. And so we had this, my sister was perfectly fine when she was born. I had a huge reaction against it with the shot too as well, and she had it even worse than I did. And then she went from being kind of a kid that was healthy and strong to a little baby that was like practically comatose, right? And to this day, that's something that impacted everything in kind of my family. And I felt that we were immediately, pretty quickly cast into poverty. If it hadn't been for my dad's union job, we wouldn't have had health insurance. But that was the saving grace, that, we were able to stay on his health insurance. So when I would go to church, and I would, unlike a lot of Catholics, as I've grown to know, I would sit and I would read, the sermons along with the thing. I would follow along with stuff and I would take the stuff in, and what always came out to me, where I found my points of connection was in that, the people that you look to fight with are the least among you, right? That which you do to the least among us, so you do unto me, right? That whole idea that we're kind of judged, right, by, or let me put it in non-religious terms, like we're kind of like, our moral compass is determined by how we act to those the least among us, right? And that whole idea, I know motivates lots and lots of folks out there. And so anyways, this goes back to Christopher Rodkey. With Chris, his ministry and his activism and all stuff always, stuck out to me as like one of these folks. I mean, there's lots of people out there, but I've wanted to have him on the show for a while to talk a little about those, that religion and politics, especially when we see, this rising of this religious discourse in the service of white supremacy, the rising of religious discourse in the service of hate, right, of racism, right, of sexism, right, of the the subordination of women through legislation. I mean, when religion gets mobilized in that way, I think it can be a very strong, or the tendency can be to therefore throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, right? And for, you don't have to agree with me on this one, but for my money, that kind of ethical discourse that comes out of many religions, right, if not most religions, is one of the discourses that provides us with tools and language and discourse for how to think about justice and hope and love and carrying a community, right? Now, I don't see myself as someone, now I'm not someone who's per se particularly religious per se, right? But I know the meaning that discourse had for me in shaping of my political fortunes, right? And my political future and how I looked at the world. And so that's something that, Chris and I are going to talk a little bit about. We're going to also talk a little about his campaign. So my point of kind of this kind of lengthy closing to the show was, and kind of introduction to his for next week, is that we had some conflicts for I had a conflict for next Monday that kind of came up after we had booked the time. And I really wanted to have that show and make sure that we got it, because it's the week, it's like the lead up to Christmas, it's in the middle of the it's the holiday season. It seemed like a really good time to have that conversation. So what we're going to do is we're going to pre-record the show on Thursday, and then we'll release it to everybody on Monday. For our patrons, I'll probably release it to our patrons a little bit early, so you'll have an opportunity to check out the show. I might even do a live stream with the show to our patron page, and then release next Monday for Out to Coop Live for everybody. We'll release the show and our podcast on our YouTube channel and all that. I'm really looking forward to that. So do check that out. Anyways, that's what I got for tonight, everybody. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Shireen. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Penelope, even though Penelope looks more like a bot. But thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for sticking with us. And thank you all for your support. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We're remind you can help support this show. You can help support all we do at Raging Chicken by going on to patreon.com/rcpress. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Thank you all for tuning in tonight, everybody. We'll see you later in the week and again next week. Hope you're doing well. Keep up the fight.
See ya.